The moment I saw the invitation, something twisted in my stomach. It wasn't the date or the location, it was just another dinner at my brother-in-law's fancy home in Long Island, but the heaviness I felt. That was all too familiar. Every time these dinners came around, I felt like I was walking into a lion's den. Polished smiles. Polite nods. And the unspoken undercurrent that I didn't quite belong. My husband, Daniel, handed me the envelope like he was passing off a bill. "It's just dinner. Don't make this a thing," he said, already tired of the conversation we hadn't even had. I wanted to decline. I wanted to say, "You go without me." But I didn't. I never did. Because keeping peace had somehow become my job in this family. And like always, I convinced myself it'd be better to just show up and smile. The house was as pristine as ever, big, white columns, a driveway lined with brand new cars, not a blade of grass out of place. I wore a modest dress, did my makeup soft, and still felt like I was wrapped in plastic wrap, presentable, but out of place. At the door, I waved awkwardly. No one waved back. A few murmurs, a glance over the shoulder, then heads turned away. I wasn't new to this. The dining table stretched long across the room, with place cards like some sort of wedding rehearsal. Mine was at the far end, right next to the window. Away from the main chatter. Away from Daniel, who took a seat right beside his sister like it was the most natural thing in the world. Plates clinked. Wine poured. Jokes flew across the table, and every so often, someone would say something that had just enough of a sting to make you wonder if it was personal. "Remember when we thought Madeline would never find a job? Look at her now." Chuckles. I forced a smile, though I could feel my jaw tighten. Then Jason, my brother-in-law, stood up, raising his glass. "All right, let's play a game," he announced. Each of us shares the most embarrassing family moment we remember. Let's laugh a little, yeah? I knew that tone. That mock cheer. That performative grin. Jason wasn't just playing games, he was setting a stage. And we were the cast. One by one, stories went around the table. A cousin wet his pants in first grade. A niece broke grandma's vase. Everyone laughed in that easy, forgiving way families do. Then Jason turned to me. "Oh, I've got a good one," he said. "Madeline, remember when you stayed with us for those? What was it, 6 months? Right after you lost your job?" The room stilled. I could feel eyes swivel toward me. He kept going. "You were so down and out, we practically had to feed you. Poor thing, couldn't even buy your own shampoo. We joked she should have registered as a dependent on our taxes." Laughter erupted. I froze. It wasn't the memory, it was how he twisted it. How he weaponized my lowest moment into entertainment. And everyone laughed. Even the kids. I opened my mouth. Actually, I started, but someone cut in, "Oh, come on, it's just a joke." Daniel didn't say a word. Just sipped his wine. That was the worst part. Not the joke. Not even the laughter. It was the silence that followed when I needed someone to say, "That's enough." No one did. Not my husband. Not my sister. Not even my father-in-law, who once told me I was like a second daughter. I looked around the table. Smiles. Smirks. Some eyes dodged mine. Some stared, waiting for me to either break or laugh along. In that moment, I remembered every time I had spoken up for these people. Covered for their mistakes. Supported them quietly, without expectation. And now? I was the punchline. I tried to stand up, mumbled something about needing to use the restroom. Jason piped up again. Leaving already? Can't handle a little banter? I sat back down slowly. Something inside me snapped, not like a branch, but like a knot untying. For years, I'd been conditioned to think speaking up meant starting a war. That peace was worth swallowing pride. That family meant sacrifice, my sacrifice. My hands were trembling. I reached for my water glass and knocked it over, water spilling across the white tablecloth like a confession. A few gasps. Someone chuckled. Jason smirked. You always were a bit dramatic. That was the moment. That was when I stopped smiling. Stopped nodding. Stopped playing the part they wrote for me. That was the night I stopped being quiet. The door shut behind us with a soft click, and neither of us said a word. Daniel headed straight to the car like he was on autopilot. I followed, still hearing the echoes of laughter that weren't meant to be kind. He started the engine, and the silence filled the space faster than the heater could warm the cabin. The hum of the tires on the road was the only sound between us. Not a word. Not a glance. Just mile after mile of nothingness. The streetlights cut through the windshield, flashing across his face like a rhythm I couldn't unsee. Light, shadow, guilt. Repeat. I turned my head toward him, hoping he'd say something. Anything. But his jaw was tight, his hands at 10 and 2 like he was taking a driving test. The road curved ahead, but our conversation didn't. I broke first. Do you think what Jason did tonight was funny? My voice was steady, but the weight behind it wasn't. He didn't look at me. It's just how our family jokes. I nodded slowly, letting that land. So, when they humiliate me, I'm supposed to laugh along? He finally glanced over. You're overreacting. And there it was. Not just silence, but complicity. He hadn't just sat there, he'd co-signed it. With every bite of his food, every sip of wine, every blank look, he'd handed them permission. This wasn't just about tonight. This had been happening for years. I remembered the first time I met his family. Christmas. I was young, excited, eager to make a good impression. I suggested we all donate gifts to a shelter instead of exchanging presents. His mother laughed first. That's sweet, dear. But we're not the Salvation Army. I'd brushed it off. Thought it was a one-off. But it kept happening. Slowly. Steadily. Like a leak behind drywall. You don't notice the damage until the whole wall caves in. Back then, I told myself I was just naive. Now I know better. People don't really change, they just get better at hiding what they are. If I stayed silent, I'd be no better than them. The city lights blurred past us as we pulled into the garage. The building's usual buzz felt far away. We rode the elevator up, still not speaking. When we stepped inside our apartment, I kicked off my shoes, and he dropped his keys onto the counter with a clatter. It started over something small. He asked why I didn't just laugh it off. I said I wasn't in the business of laughing at my own expense. He said I made a scene. I said he let them humiliate me. You embarrassed me, he snapped. I turned toward him, slow and deliberate. You mean when I walked out? Not when your brother turned me into a joke? His eyes narrowed. You always make it about you. I stared at him. And for the first time, really saw him. Not the man I married. Not the partner I thought I had. But a reflection of that dinner table. Smiling at cruelty. Pretending discomfort is the same as unity. I walked to the hallway. There was a photo from our wedding on the wall. He's smiling, hand on my waist. Tonight, that smile felt like a mask. I went straight to the bathroom, shut the door, and leaned against it. In the mirror, I saw someone I barely recognized. Mascara smeared under tired eyes. Lips tight, jaw clenched. I wiped my face slowly, deliberately. This is what silence does. It stains you. Slowly. Quietly. Until you don't even notice you've stopped existing. I thought about calling my sister. But then I saw her face again, laughing, nodding along. No. There was no one to call. I peeled off my earrings. Rinsed my hands. Watched the water swirl down the drain. Removed my wedding ring and set it beside the sink. It didn't feel like rebellion. Just truth. Undeniable. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. I sat by the window in the living room. The city moved on as if nothing had happened. Cabs, lights, people, living. I sat in stillness, but my mind didn't. My father used to say, respect isn't given in this family, it's traded for obedience. I never liked that phrase. But it lived in me now, clear as ever. I had spent years buying peace with my own dignity. Tonight, I realized that deal was off. Their laughter kept playing in my head. Then Daniel's silence. It all blurred together. Different faces, same betrayal. I grabbed a small notebook from the drawer, one I'd used for grocery lists and errands. I flipped to a blank page and wrote just one line. One day, I'll make him beg. That night, I started planning my quiet revenge. I woke up before dawn. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Daniel was gone, the bed still held his weight where he had sat last night. I stayed under the blanket a moment, listening. The air had a chill not from the window being open, but from the way my body settled into disappointment. Coffee percolated in the kitchen, even the hum from the machine sounded indifferent. I wandered into the living room, opened my journal, and stared at the lines I wrote by the end of yesterday. The words looked like someone else's handwriting. I flipped through my phone and found the group chat with his family, a joke my sister-in-law made about my career pivot. I closed it fast. I remembered dinner night after night like wallpaper peeling, every joke, every silence, every glance that said I wasn't part of the room. I told myself I was the misfit. Today I knew I was the target. I stood by the window, the city beginning to wake beyond my pain. The laughter hadn't just echoed, it had grown louder in my memory. Transition. I remember my first Thanksgiving with them clearly. I arrived eager. I brought my signature potato salad, and such hope. Jason smirked and said something about liberal tears just as dessert was served. Daniel laughed. I laughed too, though a small part of me died inside. Back then I excused it as family banter. But now I see the pattern. The jabs went deeper than jokes. My idea of charity work? Mocked as naive. My accomplishments? Dismissed. Their question wasn't, what do you do, but how long will you do it? I heard the echoes again last night, the same laughter repurposed. She always plays victim, Jason's voice from a recording I haven't found yet said. I realized the betrayal wasn't random, it was structured. Cruelty dressed as tradition. When I discovered the voice memo, I froze. I opened the file and in a minute heard Jason say, she always plays victim. Let's see how long she lasts in this crew. Then Daniel, let her cry. She'll still be back next year. I remembered the dinner table. Their faces smiling. My mind racing. At first, I felt numb, then anger flared. This wasn't neglect. This was design. I left the recording running, heart pounding, skin cool. I did not shout. I did not cry. I listened. I counted breaths. I realized I had proof. This wasn't just me being ignored. This was me being invited, only to be humiliated. Later, Daniel sent me a text, "Greg wants to apologize." I called and watched the video. Greg looked at the camera, smirk soft, rehearsed lines falling from lips that didn't carry truth. "I'm sorry if you were offended. We love you. You know how we are." He ended, "Let's move on, all right?" And I recorded it, adding it to the archive. My reaction wasn't tears, it was strategy. And then I stopped being patient with silence. I went to the window. The skyline above Manhattan twinkled. I thought of my father's words, "Respect isn't given in this family, it's traded for obedience." I realized I'd been paying that debt my whole life. Tonight, I didn't cash it in. I rewrote the terms. I pulled out a notebook and wrote 3 words, "One day, he'll beg." My pulse slowed. My mind cleared. I understood, I don't need their apology. I need their acknowledgement. And if they won't give it, I'll take it. The blinds were barely drawn and the skyline sat still, indifferent, as if mocking me. My feet hit the cold floor before the alarm even had a chance. I wasn't tired. I wasn't wired either. I was something else, sharp. Focused. I opened the window slightly. The breeze felt like a clean cut. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. For a second I froze. Then I answered. Enzo Tardino, the voice said, low, steady. "We have leverage." My breath caught. Not fear, adrenaline. He didn't say hello. He didn't need to. The world, just yesterday, had made me feel like a fool. This morning, I felt like the person holding the wire cutters. "I'm listening," I said. He talked fast, but not sloppily. His tone was surgical. What he laid out wasn't hearsay, it was evidence. Dates. Names. Money trails. Offshore shells. Property titles. My name. Kenton's use. All connected. All real. And somehow, all mine. I looked at the mug in my hand. Coffee steam rose like a flag at half-mast. I turned on speakerphone, sat down, pulled out a pen. My hand didn't shake. Enzo finished with, "You have more power than you think. Don't waste it on being shocked." I didn't. I said nothing for a moment. Just breathed. Then I whispered, almost to myself, "I never asked for pity. I asked for respect." He hung up. I looked out the window again. The sky hadn't changed. But I had. By midday, I texted Marcia Claiborne. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She didn't ask questions. She just replied, "Where?" We met in Brooklyn. Quiet cafe. Late lunch crowd. I got there first. She slid into the booth 10 minutes later, slid a flash drive across the table like it was sugar. Meeting room photo. 3 email chains. All with timestamps, she said. I asked, "You trust me?" She didn't flinch. I trust the truth more. We went through the plan. Timeline. Who to loop in. What to hold back. What to leak. No big speeches. Just facts. Around us, the world moved on. A couple argued about rent. A student typed notes. Nobody knew what we were putting into motion. But I felt it humming, something coming alive. I got home before dusk. Checked my email. One new alert from the bank. Large transfer. I blinked. Clicked in. An account I didn't recognize. A shell company registered under a meaningless name, but tied to Kenton. My name on the withdrawal. My name, again. I walked to the safe. Opened the small black folder I kept behind tax documents. Original deed to the Belrose house. Still in my name. Dated. Stamped. They thought I forgot. I opened my camera, took a photo, then another with my ID beside it. Sent both to Enzo. He replied within seconds, perfect. And that was when I knew I didn't need to scream. I just needed to aim. Later that night, I walked without purpose but with direction. Past deli windows, past the same block I passed for years. I took off the bracelet Kenton gave me on our second anniversary. Tossed it in a street bin without breaking stride. This wasn't revenge. This was reclaiming what was mine. At home, I pulled out my journal. Wrote. From now on, power means I control my story. Then I underlined it. Twice. I looked at the clock. Midnight near. Tomorrow, they'd think it was another ordinary day. They'd smile. They'd lie. They'd think they were still the ones writing the script. But I was holding the pen. I received the invitation in the morning. Kenton mentioned over breakfast, Greg wants to make peace, let's have dinner tonight. Just the family. He said it casual, as though there were no carryover cost, no hurt, no reckoning. I paused at the sink, coffee halfway to my lips. I felt the red flags flutter. A family reconciliation dinner? With the same people who joked at my expense just a week ago? But I agreed. I decided that sometimes showing up is the best offense. I laid out a calm dress, neutral tones, no drama. I packed my phone in my purse, recorder app active but the screen black. Under that calm exterior, a plan formed. I wasn't going as the wounded. I was going as the watcher. Because this dinner? It wasn't just about dinner. It was about truth. Walking into Greg's home that evening felt different. The lights were soft, music discreet. You'd have thought we were there for forgiveness. Greg's wife greeted me with, "Nice to see you looking so well," her tone sweet but thin. Kenton poured my wine. The game began early. Greg smiled. "Glad to see you're over the little misunderstanding," he said. A wave of polite laughter followed. Delora chimed in, "We're just messing with you, you know, we love to tease." I sat still. I sipped slowly, watched their eyes flicker. They weren't sorry. They were performing. When they suggested I was too sensitive or just stressed, I nodded. Because I wasn't going to react. I was calculating. The apology dinner was a gaslight deliverable. The glasses clinked. The guests moved in and out of the room like shadows. I slightly repositioned in my seat, made sure my recorder was tucked away but active. Someone asked me about work. I answered firmly, thoughtfully. They expected me to shrink. They expected me to laugh along. They miscalculated. When Greg's son Jeremy's voice cracked through from behind a couch, saying softly, "Didn't you say she'd crack by now?" the room froze. Greg's eyes widened. Dolores' smile faltered. The mask slipped. I leaned forward. "Crack under what, Jeremy?" My voice quiet, controlled. Kenton opened his mouth but closed it again. I raised my hand. "It's important we finish the conversation. For clarity." My calm cut deeper than any shout. The recording on my phone captured it. Their veneer shattered. They knew I knew. I didn't mock them. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I just revealed the truth of their intent. I stood up, thanked them for a nice dinner, and walked out. The night air felt colder against my skin. Kenton didn't speak. Not even halfway home. In the car he sighed, finally. I asked, "Still think I'm imagining things?" He didn't answer. He only said, "It's complicated." I pressed, "It's only complicated if you protect lies." That night I made copies of the recording. I saved files. I opened my journal and wrote, "They tried to bury me in doubt." Instead, I buried them in their own words. I realized something: this wasn't just retaliation. It was restoration. I walked to the window and watched the lights in the city. I whispered to myself, but the worst was still coming, and this time, I wouldn't be the one bleeding. The morning after my confrontation felt quiet, but not peaceful. I sat at the kitchen table with the coffee cooling beside me. The recording from the dinner flashed in my mind, every line, every glance, weighed heavy. I contacted Enzo right away. "I might need your network's eyes soon," I said. The words were calm, but the intent behind them edged sharp. Kenton drifted around the house, distant and stiff. He avoided any mention of the dinner. I tried one more time. "Greg isn't just toxic, he's dangerous." He paused, then said, "That's family. You don't throw them out over one night." His tone held denial. He didn't see the war I was in. I did. I sank into the quiet. Because silence was no longer comfort, it was a sign of what was coming. I typed an email to Greg, "We both know what was said. End it now or I'll escalate." I hit send and waited. The reply came almost instantly, "You've always been dramatic. Grow thicker skin." The message forwarded to the family with a caption, "Guess who's threatening us now?" My blood chilled, not from fear, but from the betrayal. Every laugh, every whisper, they were witnesses now. I called Kenton, voice sharp. "What do you want me to do about it?" he asked. I hung up. No conversation anymore. Just the fact that I was on the front line, alone. I spent the afternoon organizing files, backing up everything. Lawyer on the line. Enzo sending license plates, addresses, the trail tangible. I found a hidden funnel of money from Greg's business. Shell companies registered in my name. The thread stretched back years. This was bigger than hurt. This was weaponized. I rehearsed conversations in my head, quiet, firm, unavoidable. I didn't want a public spectacle. I wanted certainty. My steps measured. My intention clear. By 7:30 p.m., I pulled into Greg's company parking lot. He was leaning against his car, keys in hand. "Stalking now?" he sneered. I held my phone up, camera ready. "I don't need to stalk. You left a trail." His face shifted, smirk faltering. You're looking into nothing. He laughed, but the joke didn't land. I evened my voice. Shell accounts. Trust funds. My name. Faces. Dates. You did a lot of hiding. He tried to scoff, but the fear in his eyes was plain. My final words, next time you hear from me, it won't be directly. I left him standing there. The night was cool, clear. The city lights behind me showed I was moving forward. Later, I walked home in silence. No radio. No podcasts. Just the rhythm of my shoes on the sidewalk. I slipped off the bracelet Kenton gave me years ago and left it in a bin without looking back. I journaled quietly. The silence wasn't peace, it was the sound of power shifting. I realized I didn't want apologies anymore. I wanted acknowledgement. I didn't want to hold on to pain, I wanted to track its end. The night closed around me and I felt ready. Not for revenge, but for what came next. The city lights of Charleston glowed like embers. I stepped onto the rooftop terrace, the harbor spread out behind me, and felt the calm before the storm. Guests whispered by string lights, laughter floating above sails moored in the water. I held my glass, not wine, a sparkling water, quiet, controlled. My husband gave me a small nod, the kind you give someone you're finally seeing. And there was Delora, bright dress, a handshake here, a pat on the back there, acting like everything was normal. I watched her from the edge of the gathering. My phone vibrated in my clutch. Enzo's message said, green light. Proof files ready. I swallowed. Tonight isn't just about exposure, I thought. It's about reclaiming my narrative. The announcer's voice pulled my attention to the stage. I took a breath. The moment I'd waited for was here. Delora walked to the speaker podium beneath the Beau Rose PRYNN banner. I heard her name first. Thanks to my vision, she said, and the applause followed. My heart sank briefly, then steadied. I stepped forward when she paused. Excuse me, if I may add, a hush rippled. I looked out across the crowd, the donors, the familiar faces. That idea 15 years ago I pitched it, I said, and held up the original proposal, my handwriting clear. The murmur began. Delora's smile slipped. I raised my voice, nothing special, just calm. History is not ownership by the loudest voice, but truth scanned by time. I stepped down. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. I walked back to my seat, and the guests no longer just looked at Delora, they looked at me. I breathed in and allowed the moment of recognition. I had reclaimed my line. I paused, then used the microphone again. I've lived in your reflections long enough. Let me reflect one you missed. I pressed play on a short audio clip, Delora's voice, soft, plotted, she was useful until she became visible. The room dropped into silence. Kenton's face drained color. My husband took my hand. Across the gallery, the sculpture I made stood under spotlights. This piece belongs to me, I said. It hung in my studio while you claimed it for applause. The supporters shifted on their feet. Their stories, our stories, tilted. I closed with, if you rewrite the story, you rewrite the wound. It's time to heal from the version you drafted, not the one that lived. I stepped down one last time. Waves of whispers followed me back to my table, and then came the real shift. I drifted through the crowd. Donors who once clapped for Delora now eyed me with curiosity, maybe respect. I found Kenton by the railing, looking out at the water. I didn't approach with anger. I joined him silently. We can still do this right, for the family, I said quietly. He turned to me, voice shaky, I thought you didn't care about being family anymore. I cared about being myself, I replied. They just didn't see me. He let that stand alone. I stepped away, no more illusions of acceptance. I walked toward the exit, away from a family that valued facade over truth. I walked toward something real. The skies shifted as I left. In the parking lot I checked my phone. Enzo's text read, "They'll act by morning." My heart didn't race. It steadied. I realized the night had done its work. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading. I looked back at the gala building one more time and whispered under my breath, I didn't just survive their story, I wrote the first line of mine. The city lights of Charleston glowed like embers. I stepped onto the rooftop terrace, the harbor spread out behind me, and felt the calm before the storm. Guests whispered by string lights, laughter floating above sails moored in the water. I held my glass, not wine, a sparkling water, quiet, controlled. My husband gave me a small nod, the kind you give someone you're finally seeing. And there was Delora, bright dress, a handshake here, a pat on the back there, acting like everything was normal. I watched her from the edge of the gathering. My phone vibrated in my clutch. Enzo's message said, "Green light. Proof files ready." I swallowed. Tonight isn't just about exposure, I thought. It's about reclaiming my narrative. The announcer's voice pulled my attention to the stage. I took a breath. The moment I'd waited for was here. Delora walked to the speaker podium beneath the Beau Rose PRYNN banner. I heard her name first. "Thanks to my vision," she said, and the applause followed. My heart sank briefly, then steadied. I stepped forward when she paused. "Excuse me, if I may add," a hush rippled. I looked out across the crowd, the donors, the familiar faces. "That idea 15 years ago I pitched it," I said, and held up the original proposal, my handwriting clear. The murmur began. Delora's smile slipped. I raised my voice, "Nothing special, just calm. History is not ownership by the loudest voice, but truth scanned by time." I stepped down. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. I walked back to my seat, and the guests no longer just looked at Delora, they looked at me. I breathed in and allowed the moment of recognition. I had reclaimed my line. I paused, then used the microphone again. "I've lived in your reflections long enough. Let me reflect one you missed." I pressed play on a short audio clip. Delora's voice, soft, plodded. She was useful until she became visible. The room dropped into silence. Kenton's face drained color. My husband took my hand. Across the gallery, the sculpture I made stood under spotlights. "This piece belongs to me," I said. "It hung in my studio while you claimed it for applause." The supporters shifted on their feet. Their stories, our stories, tilted. I closed with, "If you rewrite the story, you rewrite the wound. It's time to heal from the version you drafted, not the one that lived." I stepped down one last time. Waves of whispers followed me back to my table, and then came the real shift. I drifted through the crowd. Donors who once clapped for Delora now eyed me with curiosity, maybe respect. I found Kenton by the railing, looking out at the water. I didn't approach with anger. I joined him silently. "We can still do this right, for the family," I said quietly. He turned to me, voice shaky. "I thought you didn't care about being family anymore." "I cared about being myself," I replied. "They just didn't see me." He let that stand alone. I stepped away, no more illusions of acceptance. I walked toward the exit, away from a family that valued facade over truth. I walked toward something real. The skies shifted as I left. In the parking lot I checked my phone. Enzo's text read, "They'll act by morning." My heart didn't race. It steadied. I realized the night had done its work. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading. I looked back at the gala building one more time and whispered under my breath, I didn't just survive their story, I wrote the first line of mine. I woke up before the morning light fully broke through the blinds of my Manhattan apartment. The city still hummed outside, buses, footsteps, distant horns, but inside there was a quiet that felt earned. I sat at the kitchen table, my husband already had his coffee, his eyes on me in a way they never had before. I thought of last night's gala, of the power I felt, the recognition that finally wasn't stolen. For years I had played the role of the silent helper. Tonight, I realized it was over. I opened my journal to the very first page, one day I'll stop being invisible. My pen hovered, then I added, today I stepped into sight. I looked at my secure drive, documents timestamped, emails sent, allies informed. The work wasn't yet over, but this chapter was. Later that morning, Kenton sent a message, "We need to talk, come to the estate." I drove out to the Belrose family estate, the house I once felt like a guest in. Inside the drawing room I found Kenton and Delora standing side by side, Greg nowhere to be seen. Kenton handed me a letter. It admitted what I expected, Delora had manipulated the name of the gala event and taken credit for the sculpture that was mine. The admission was thin, the apology thinner. My expression stayed calm. Inside, vindication whispered. "Thank you for finally telling the truth," I said. I didn't celebrate. I clarified. The letter meant boundaries now. As I walked toward the front door, I glanced at the large family portrait on the wall. At last I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like I belonged, but under my terms. Back in my apartment later that afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with a nonprofit board I'd been invited to join. I reflected quietly, professional recognition doesn't mean stepping on others. It means standing tall for yourself. I called Marcia, "We'll build something new. Not just to be seen, but to be trusted." Her voice held warmth, relief. I opened my email and read a stream of messages from donors who had heard the recordings and changed their loyalties. I stood by the window and said softly, "I'm not defined by their laughter anymore." I set aside a speech draft for the upcoming press release, clear, calm, and bold. I founded this. I guide this. When the day of the press release arrived, I stood on stage, name tag pinned to my chest, microphone in hand, lights bright. I said, "Tonight we launch the Belrose PRYNN Legacy Fund." And let me be absolutely clear, PRYNN stands not for silence, but for voice. The applause came. Delora watched from the side, her smile gone. Kenton sat in the back row, his nod low-key but present. I felt the weight lift, not just the recognition, but the ownership of it. Afterward, I met donors in the hallway, some shook my hand, some hugged me. Respect. Not pity. That night I returned home and looked down at my wedding ring. I'll keep it, but it no longer defines me. They once thought humiliating me would silence me. But silence isn't absence, it's a space for truth. I packed my journal, the flash drive with the recordings, and the old silver cloth with Delora's letter into a safe box. I looked at the sunrise emerging over the cityscape and realized while justice had been served, healing was mine now to own. I sent one final message to Enzo, "Thank you. The world now knows the truth." I paused and whispered under my breath, I wasn't simply the survivor of the evening, they became part of my story. And I became its author.